screwed us with the Google Pixel Fold. Yes, and I've been saying this for a long time before the phone even came out. This phone needed the Tensor G3. And it's funny because so many people defended the Tensor G2 and they're like, it's fine, the Pixel 7 is good, it works just fine in the Pixel Fold, it's all you need. And it sounds like, it feels like half the critics of this phone that were positively praising it then turn around with the Google Tensor 3, which I think is a significantly better chip in so many different ways, and then criticize it, like for being underpowered. I'm like, how do we go from this is okay to this is not okay? But there are quite a few things that are not okay because this phone, one, is not worth $1,800, which I've been saying from the get-go, but two, they really devalue this a lot. Whenever you come out with a phone just 2 months later, your own silicon, and then you go, okay, this one, 3 years operating system updates, 5 years security patches, and then the Pixel 8 Pro, 7 and 7. Or this guy, the Pixel 8, 7 and 7. 7 years of operating system updates, 7 years security patches. How could we only get just a few months prior? Like this phone came out, what, June 27th? We're like 2 months apart basically. And then this one, the Pixel Fold, twice as much money, 2.5 times as much money basically than the Pixel 8. And we get 3 years of operating system updates, 5 years security patches, and they couldn't wait and put the Tensor G3 in it. And they set a really bad precedence for this. So what does that mean? That means that the chipset that's not good enough to compete with the other flagships, it's not as good as the Snapdragon 8 Generation 2, quote unquote, is going to be in the presumably $1,800 Pixel Fold 2 next summer. So I don't like the way that they're doing this. It's one thing if you come out with the Tensor G3 and then 2 or 3 months later you come out with, let's say, the Pixel Fold 2. That would be fine because it's a brand new chip. But whenever you're just using the leftover bench stock that's on the shelf 2 months before your new phone comes out, before your new Tensor G4 comes out, and then you're like, just yeet that sucker into one of these phones for $1,800, well, it's kind of frustrating. And I got to tell you, basically Android 14 has been on almost a month. I still can't get it on my Pixel Fold, and I know other people can't as well. So I don't know if Google is being lazy. I don't know if they're just trying to capitalize on just using the same parts all year long. And here's the other thing. You're probably going to say, but Adam, you said that it was a good chip. Well, I've had problems with the Tensor G2. Like, it's not my favorite chip. It was an improvement over the Tensor G1, but the Tensor G3 is a significantly better chip. Would I want to use a Tensor G2 for 7 years? No, I wouldn't. Do I even want to use it for 5 years? No. I mean, I think it's okay for 3 years. That's probably perfectly fine. But when you talk about a price tag of $1,799, you have to bring your A game. We're not talking about a $699 Pixel 8. We're not talking about a $999 Pixel 8 Pro. We're talking about essentially a $2,000 phone after taxes that has the same chip as the Pixel 7a. So I don't really like this philosophy. I don't like what Google is doing with this strategy. They're just like, we'll just throw the same chip in all of our products this year. And that's what they did. That's what they did. The Pixel 7, the 7 Pro, the 7a, the Pixel tablet, and the Pixel Fold, all running the same Google Tensor G2. Now, this year, that will be a better story because the Tensor G3, I think, is a better overall chip. I think the performance is better, the speed's better, multitasking is better, the modem is better, battery and heat is better. So there's a lot of things checked in the better department. And I would have a lot less complaints had they went ahead and front-loaded it in this. Like, could you imagine if the Pixel Fold debuted, basically like in July or August, undercut the Z Fold 5, undercut the Z Flip 5, undercut the iPhone, and they said, bam, here's our new Pixel Fold, we're here, check out our foldable, and by the way, our new Tensor G3. Like, why in the world is your most expensive phone, the most exotic phone, the coolest one that you want people to pay basically $2,000 for, is not getting everything front center stage at the beginning of the year and is catching it on the end of the year after it's already been put in the budget phone, the normal phone, and the Pro Series phone. Now, I know a lot of folks are like, well, Adam, the Z Fold 5 comes out in the fall. It gets the Snapdragon chip that comes out basically at the end of this year. I mean, the Snapdragon 8 Generation 3 just got announced. So by time you actually get that in the Z Fold 5 or Z Fold 6 later on next year, it's going to be almost a year old. Well, we can make two arguments about that. One, I think most people probably think the Google Tensor G3 versus the Snapdragon 8 Generation 3 are like a completely different story, right? I think most people probably think that the Snapdragon 8 Generation 3 probably will run circles around the G3. And it's interesting because there is a much bigger emphasis. They were talking about how there's more dedicated processing and hardware built into the chip to take advantage of and to process AI, machine learning, all that cool stuff. That's the future. That's where we're going with these phones. So you could probably say in an argument, well, Adam, the Snapdragon 8 Generation 3 is going to be just as good at AI as the Tensor G3, but it's going to be way more powerful. And of course, it's not way more powerful. And I caution, don't pay attention to the benchmarks too much. And for those of you who say, oh, benchmarks don't matter or benchmarks do matter, they do matter to an extent. Like just to give you a baseline understanding of where you're at. But it's not all about the benchmarks, right? It's like an indicator of horsepower on a car. It tells us how powerful it is. So whenever you look at it though and go, well, one's got 340 horsepower, one's got 360, not that big of a deal, right? So I think that the Tensor G3 competes well, but it has this stigma attached to it because half the people on the planet think that it's an Exynos chip when it's not. And then people say it's a mid-tier chip, all these different, I've gone over this. We've talked in circles about this, but when the public believes that, and then when half the reviewers echo a lot of the same things, they hammer down on that stuff, it makes it seem like it's a kind of a cheap chip, like it's not that good, like you shouldn't be paying that much money for it, it's not something that should be in a flagship series phone. Well, you could say that, but Google, of course, they have their own planning, they know what they're doing, I believe, and they've got a lot of customization, capitalizing on their history and their legacy of computation, search engine, AI, machine learning, all that great stuff. Cool, whatever. But yeah, there is an argument to be made because when you take a look at, the Z Fold 5 and it gets a Snapdragon 8 Generation 2 and all that other cool stuff, and then you're like, Google Tensor G2. Yeah, same price. Doesn't really add up. I don't have a problem paying $17.99 for a Z Fold 5. S Pen support, DeX. I think they've got great cameras. I think the cameras in here, in most instances, are better than the cameras over here. I have a lot more faith in the Snapdragon 8 Generation 2. I think that I like the internal screen design better on this one. I like a lot of things, like battery life, heat management. The battery life on the Pixel Fold is abysmal. I barely get 4.5 hours of screen on time out of this sucker. Hopefully that'll change if I can ever get Android 14. Haven't been able to try it out on here yet. But there's just a lot of question marks, what ifs, and a lot of scrutiny already on the Tensor G3. How much more so is it bad with the Tensor G2? So I think the Tensor G2 is okay. I had no problem with it in the Pixel 7. I had no problem with it in the Pixel 7 Pro. If they didn't make a Tensor G3, I'd be like, you know what, okay, if you want to keep using your silicon, throw it in there. I said from the get-go it should have been priced at $14.99 tops. Tops. This is a $14.99 phone. And yeah, no Tensor G3. So if you bought this phone, it's kind of already dated because it's a year-old hardware, and then it's not even getting the full support that the new phones that they just released a few months later are getting. So you're going to get 3 years of operating system updates, 5 years security patches on a basically $2,000 phone that basically got one-upped by the same company with the better chip that should have gone in here just 2 months later. So I think that Google made a lot of mistakes with this phone. I think that they did a lot of things kind of halfway. I think that they didn't commit fully to trying to make this the best phone that they could. I think that they made some serious problems with not giving it longer support and not putting the new, better chip in it. And I think it's overpriced. But I still like it. It's really hard for me to talk about all this and say all these negative things because I do have these concerns. But the front screen experience on this phone, probably my favorite this year. It's so nice. I didn't want to take my SIM card out of it. Now, I don't really enjoy it all that much when I open it up. I think that the dimensions on it are awkward, and I don't like this wide landscape screen on it. But for one-handed use, for just the front screen, point-and-shoot camera capabilities, there's a lot of stuff I really like about it. And that's why it's so frustrating. And it'll probably be very frustrating, too, whenever the Tensor G3 appears and the Pixel Fold 2, presumably this next summer. But that's Google for you. So anyway, I know a lot of people love this phone. I like a lot of things about this phone, so much so I was compelled to buy it at a $1,000 discount right after I made a video saying I was returning it. Because no, I used it, was very frustrated with it for the price point, and I was like, okay, $899, this is a good phone. $800, good phone. $1,800, not so much. So anyway, just some thoughts on this, but I was thinking about it. I did my live stream last night and got to kind of thinking and talking about some of this stuff, and I'm like, you know what? I think Google really screwed up a lot with this phone. But anyway, so that's all I got. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. So do you think it's a good phone? Do you think they screwed up by releasing it too early and not putting the new chip in it, not giving it longer support, especially for the price tag? Let me know your thoughts and feelings, and we'll discuss it there. And of course, if you enjoyed the video, please hit the like and the subscribe button and the little notification bell if you want updates when new videos come out. And as always, thanks for being here. I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you guys next time.